I'm not going to let these women be harmed, not on my watch. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm not going to let what I think's going to happen. Grabbed her by the hand and tried to take her into the storeroom. Once I could isolate him away from these women and the crowd or the line, that I would just be able to figure it out, neutralize the situation.
Welcome to Critical Incidents Podcast, where we explore life-defining moments. I'm your host, Kyle Ashley, a law enforcement veteran with over a decade of experience. Each episode, I'll be interviewing people about their own critical incident, a moment in their lives that shaped who they are today. From life-threatening emergencies to personal struggles, we'll hear firsthand accounts of resilience, determination, and the power of the human spirit. So sit back and let's dive into the critical incidents that shaped their lives and made them who they are.
My name is Jake Deptula. I live in Los Angeles. My critical incident took place at a coffee house where I stopped an unhinged man from attacking a woman.
Jake, go ahead and tell us about your critical incident.
My critical incident happened at a coffee house years ago. I was getting my normal iced tea. As you know, I'm an iced tea addict. And I walked in and I heard a little bit of a rumble going on in the back. And I looked back and there was a man. He seemed a little bit unhinged, wasn't sure of what his mental state was at the time, but he started harassing these women, basically directly in line. So I kind of sized up the situation, looked at him, and he started to almost get physical and wanted to lunge at them. I didn't sense that he knew them, but he was just somebody who came in from the outside, again, unhinged. And so what I did is I kind of encountered him, kept my distance. I stepped in and basically just said no and pointed right at him. And he started yelling at me, blah, blah, blah. And I said, no. And somehow that tended to lead him to a position where he moved his attention from them to me, obviously. So what I did in that moment, the whole place went dead silent. I didn't even hear an espresso machine going off at that time. Everything was done. And I ended up leading him towards the door, just kind of, one step, and then getting him out of the location. So that for me was one of a variety of encounters that I've had while working in public places over the years. I've spent a lot of time working out of coffee houses, and, when you work in public, you encounter a lot of different people that come in and out of these places. Most of them are really kind and nice, or a lot of them obviously are in a hurry, depending on what time they come in, on their way to work to grab something, things like that. So, but I've used a lot of coffee houses as my home away from home, my office, things like that. So there have been a few incidents like that where I've had to step in and basically shield or guard other people from unhinged patrons at these places.
It's interesting that in the public coffee shops, right? So if you're working in these places where people come in and they're generally just on a mission, like I just need my coffee to wake up in the morning, right? And so I'm going to go get my coffee. And when someone who is going through a crisis of any kind or is just having a bad day, when they start going towards patrons, and your thought, at least what you were trying to, what you were saying was, if you can take the attention off of the female or off of the person that they are harassing and put it on you, what kind of thoughts are running through your head once you do that? I mean, we know that would be the right thing to do, is to try to diffuse that situation. But when the attention is now put on you and not on the person that's being harassed, what are you thinking then? Like, oh, what next? Or did you have a plan in place?
That's a great question. I had no plan in place because I was not anticipating going into this establishment and having to encounter an unhinged, potentially dangerous patron. But I will tell you this, is that in my head, the first thing was, I am not going to let these women be harmed, not on my watch. That was literally what ran through my head that time. And I realized in that moment, it's like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm not going to let what I think is going to happen. So it was more for me a way to diffuse the situation and figure it out rather than let that unfold in front of me. Because unfortunately, a lot of times there's not much that the workers can do, the baristas, they're kind of beholden. And obviously in these situations, especially here in Los Angeles and California, it's the land of the lawsuit. So everyone is litigious in some form or another. Either if they're not suing, they're getting sued. And I know that sounds really like a exaggeration, but there's a reason why lawyers make so much here on the West Coast. And so when I saw that, it was almost instinct that kicked in. It wasn't a plan. It wasn't anything else like that. So I think probably what my intention was, again, is I was in a much better position to, once I could sort of isolate him away from these women and the crowd, basically, or the line, that I would just be able to figure it out, basically kind of neutralize the situation. And my intention obviously was not to get physical, was not to do anything that would violate anyone's rights. But at the same point, if there was something and it had gotten where I thought it was going to go, then I would have stepped in. But luckily, I didn't need to do anything, which is, in some ways, again, this in law enforcement. I mean, you don't want to take it to that next level if you can help it. If you can get somebody, if you can, through conversation, move the critical situation or critical incident out of a very vulnerable spot, you'll take that opportunity, right?
Absolutely. One of the most effective tools that, anybody can have, especially, whether it's, law enforcement or if it's just encountering someone at a coffee shop, your verbal de-escalation and, word ninja, right? So you just need to be able to use your words and your body language to really diffuse the situation. That's obviously the most preferred outcome that we would want to have in any situation. So it's great that is where it stops and doesn't have to escalate from there. So that's really good.
Absolutely. Again, you have all the terminology too, the verbal de-escalation, everything else like that. I'm obviously coming from a layperson's term, so I'm sure I could learn a lot about you if I ever have to do this again. And I can use that terminology if I ever have to give a police report in a situation like this. Hopefully I don't. But, again, I've witnessed things that I've had to give a police report before, and I try to be as official. I mean, I'm right now, the position I'm in from the series that I've been doing and learning and working with law enforcement and private investigators, there are things obviously I'm picking up. But back then I had almost zero language other than maybe catching, NYPD Blue back in the day. You know what I'm saying? Like trying to, recreate those screenplays or televised teleplays in my head of what to utilize if I ever had to encounter a law enforcement officer.
You got this situation. So this is kind of the situation that kind of started, if I understand this correctly. So you run into this situation years ago and, you were able to take the attention off of the female that was in there, put it on you. And I'm sure that felt good, right? Just to know that, they probably looked at you like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. Thank you. I didn't want to have to deal with that. The situation's diffused.
It was, they were, I believe they were in a bit of shock, to be fair, because they weren't anticipating getting harassed or potentially put in a place of far worse in a physical way. But I think that in this, just to give everyone context, this is a time in places like coffee houses before the pandemic. So we've kind of become numb to, unfortunately, hourly workers being harassed based on mask mandates, based on vaccine mandates, based on so many things that they've had to police and security, that for a long time, we were seeing all these incidents come up, right, on the news and online and everywhere via social media, that these workers would unfortunately just get harassed and harassed. Right? So this is a time before then when people had no, to be fair, no expectation of this. And at first I thought the guy might have been, panhandling or might have been asking for money or whatever, but he was literally unhinged. So I don't quite know how much or how aware he was, but that didn't impact my actions in order to jump into protect mode in that time.
No, and I'm glad you brought that up, because it doesn't matter if someone, regardless of what they have going on in their life, right? Doesn't matter if they are on drugs, doesn't matter if they're going through a mental health crisis, doesn't matter what they're doing. If they are encroaching onto someone that is borderline with any threat of physical violence or the ability to take away someone's security in the place that they're in, there's no excuse for that, right? So that's not something that can be tolerated or accepted, regardless of their situation in life. Now, it might have a different response on how we can assist in getting them out of that state of mind or from that situation, but it does not give someone an excuse to be able to do those things or say those things to other people. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
Oh, no, thank you very much. It's one of those things where in those moments, as you know, you have to react quickly. Time is generally not on your side. I tend to be a very observant person, but I'm also a very focused person. When I go someplace to work, I go someplace to work, but I happen to understand enough about my surroundings and sort of assess, I don't know, I would say like the room or who's involved in the room or who's participating or who's entering or exiting a place. And I tend to pick up on that. I'm oddly enough, I'm working, but I tend to have a very high level of observation skills when it comes to those things. So, if there's anything that seems off, I'll definitely pay attention to it.
Yeah, good quality to have. You're going through this, you go through this one incident, and from my understanding, you've gone through a couple of incidents that are maybe similar, maybe a little bit different. Go and tell us about those. Yeah,
there have been a few. I mean, I've been in a situation where I've stepped in and sort of, I would say at the very least, protected or defended a barista from, first off, another irate, unhinged person who came in, started cussing her out and was just belligerent and started to throw a fit. And I basically did the same thing. Instead of saying no, I said out, and he yelled at me. He had everything else like that. And he was a little bit more difficult. And I didn't have to obviously do anything, but physically, obviously. But again, because I'm never going to these situations trying to take anything physical, but I'm fortunate because these people, as unhinged as they are, responded to my words. And as you know that's not exactly the easiest thing when somebody is going through whatever they're going through, and they may come off as unhinged and they may come off as incoherent in moments, and they actually respond to your words. So however I said it, it seems to be the one word answer, right? It's like no or out. It tends to be like unmistakably direct when it comes to what they need to do next. And that's all I can say, because, again, I'm freaking 5'8", you know what I'm saying? I'm not the most intimidating guy by any stretch of imagination, but, through words and through assertiveness, I was able to do that. So I consider myself fortunate. But I would think that if you look at all the collective experiences, and I don't know if this is just because I work so much out of coffee houses, that there have been incidents, as I mentioned before, with baristas. There was one incident where a barista there was a guy, he came in, he seemed off, he might have been on something, and basically whispered in her ear, I want to have sex with you, and grabbed her by the hand and tried to take her into the storeroom, basically. And she was able to break away, told me about it. So I basically spent the rest of her shift basically kind of body shielding her, making sure that he was nowhere within 6 feet. Because you got to remember is that as much as you would think like, oh, establishments can kick people out, people just walk right back in. And there's only so much that the police can do in these situations because people just keep coming back in. And most people, I would pretty much say across the board, in these roles are not trained to deal with this. They deal with customer service things, money things, angry, frustrated, caffeine addicted people that just want to get their coffee and go, not these kind of situations. So, and again, I consider it from that standpoint, you just have to be in a position where you're observant. And if you can help, you do help. And that's the way I sort of look at it from that standpoint. So that's another incident that happened that I consider highly critical in my perspective.
Especially when, the whispering in the ear and the grabbing of the hand and trying to forcing or pulling or doing any kind of manipulation of physical force to try to get a girl to go have sex with him at a coffee shop, right? Most people, I would say everyone, myself included in that, would not expect that to happen at a coffee shop, And so having you there, that's like, I've never experienced this before because most people wouldn't know what to do, right? Because that doesn't something that would come up often. And still being able to address a situation, come up with a plan that regardless if if it's right or wrong, you're still sticking with a plan, right? Block her from this guy, separate her from this situation, ask him to leave. Even if he comes back, we're still trying to create that barrier between the two. And you mentioned the law enforcement aspect, and were the police ever called in that situation?
They were called a couple different times for a couple different people in this situation. But if it were up to me, I would call the police in every situation. I would give them a report and do everything else like that. And when you're in that position, for me, I can't force someone, even the victim of something which I would consider assault, to report it. And I've learned this, unfortunately, the hard way. And from Strictly Stalking, the show we do, you realize, unfortunately, how so many survivors come forward and they feel re-victimized, unfortunately, by law enforcement in this situation. And they just don't feel comfortable saying it, or they're scared they may lose their jobs in those situations because they don't want to cause trouble. This particular situation, that's what I would have done, but I realized when that wasn't going to be the case, that the only thing that I could do was to make sure that he was nowhere near her for the rest of her shift.
Obviously, if it would have escalated even more past that, it would have been a good option regardless, just for the safety purposes of everyone. But I understand what you're saying with, not wanting to cause trouble and bring unnecessary attention to your job and the way that you're doing things. So I think that's kind of what you're trying to articulate there.
Yeah. And again, because if you're in that position, as I said before, each thing has to be assessed. You take it as it comes to you. It's there have been people out of some of these places, as I said before, that have gotten violent, that have gotten belligerent. But I mean, that's, to me, you hear these things and you see these things. A lot of these things are very serious. I take harassment very seriously, and I take situations like that very seriously. I've been in situations where I've had to call out when female friends of mine or family have been, harassed in public or catcalled or things like that. And you can tell visibly how uncomfortable mostly the females around me have been. And, again, the goal is not to escalate anything to the physical level. It just isn't. But you also realize, and it's interesting too, because I had a scenario where someone very close to me was catcalled in a parking lot, and this guy was kind of circling looking for spots, and then he catcalled her, and then he pulled back around, and I confronted him directly, and he apologized to me. He said, "I'm so sorry." I said, "Don't apologize to me. Apologize to her." And he goes, "I'm so sorry. I don't know why I did that." And when he said, "I don't know why I did that," I realized in that moment that he really was so conditioned and so of the expectation in his mind of what would happen by him catcalling someone, thinking it would be flattering, that he really didn't understand the true impact of his behavior in that moment. And I thought that was really eye-opening, because a lot of times you get people that are angry or confrontational after they do something like that. But this guy was kind of repentive and kind of confused of why he even did that in the first place. So I think that was pretty telling in that moment. You don't see that very often.
It's actually a really good point. A lot of times in my experience, just responding to similar instances of what you're speaking of, a lot of times when I arrive and speak with these people, no one's ever confronted them about going off at a coffee shop or catcalling women. No one's ever approached them with any kind of, energy, like the same energy that they're putting out. And so when someone does that, it does throw them off, because they've done it 100 times and no one's ever said anything. And when someone does say something, they're almost taken back from it and don't know what to do, and are, one, they're going to be like, I don't care what you say, right? Or they are going to be taken back from it so much that they're going to be like, I'm going to apologize for this because I don't know what else to do. So it's different from everyone, but a lot of times no one ever gets approached. Someone having a confrontation at a Starbucks or a coffee shop and someone yelling at them, no, right, is going to throw them off and be like, no one's ever said that to me. So kudos to you for stepping in these situations. I think it does really put into perspective a simple verbal response that can generate a positive outcome for at least the people that are being harassed in those situations.
I appreciate you saying that. And that's a really, really good point. And I, just to be clear, I don't advocate people going in and confronting just to confront. And I can't speak for somebody and give them advice. So that, like, for me, it's just the way I have done things and the way I do things. And the way I look at it is that if there's someone, a friend, family, loved one, anyone in that situation, or anyone, it's instinct for me. And that's the one thing, is like, I can't let that happen on my watch. Going back to the original thing I said, it's not something that I pre-plan. It's not something that I think about. It's just my instinct and inherent protective nature. But I don't advocate and say it's always the safest thing to do, because as you know, from a law enforcement standpoint, you really have to gauge those situations. But again, as I said before, it's just something that I do.
It's a good thing to do, moral thing to do. It is a, chivalrous thing to do, especially in your situation. But I think it is important that we do evaluate what situation we're being presented with, what we're seeing. And, we have to make the determination of, are we going to do anything about this? Are we going to let this play out? Is this my problem to deal with? Should I step in and do something? And once you make that decision, if you're out with your family, you got small children with you, it's probably not the best to get into a confrontation with someone, but you can become the best witness for the police should it evolve into something else.
That's a really good point, because, I don't want it to come off like I'm some sort of avenger or some sort of guy that's leaving his house and looking to play Batman out there. You know what I'm saying? Don't worry. I'm a threat to no one in the Batman franchise. But that's the thing, is like there are a lot of people out there that think they go out. I'm not some, Mr. Do-gooder that's going out trying to look for trouble in places that I could step in. These are just things that happen in real life. And as this is like, I can probably name off maybe a dozen, 24, critical things in my life from that standpoint. You could probably name off, 24 in an evening based on your history and your current role, Kyle. So that's the whole thing. When you look at that from that standpoint, it helps to be observant. It helps to be put in a place where you can, again, as you said, if you can do something, but you really have to very quickly assess these situations, because we're not in a climate anymore where there are a lot of dangerous situations, and there are a lot of dangerous people, and there are a lot of people who've been pushed to those critical and dangerous positions that weren't there before. We're in a very sort of high intensity and high stress world right now, where people that you wouldn't even imagine could do something so heinous are committing really, really, really terrible crimes.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. So, out of these situations that you're running into, what are some guidelines that you feel or some resources that you think would be good when it comes to encountering somebody who you may think is, we'll just say, disturbing the peace, right? Or harassing someone? What do you think? Because you have a long background in, working with victims of being stalked. And I know that there's a lot of resources for that, especially for like domestic violence awareness and, a whole bunch of resources for stalking. What kind of pertains to diffusing the situation or kind of getting yourself out of that?
That's a great question. I think that number one, I would say this is that assess where you are when you walk into a room. If you go to a regular spot, sort of assess where the exits are. Look around, get sort of a vibe for things. It always helps to kind of, form some sort of relationship with the people that work at those places. You know what I'm saying? Because they'll also tell you if they're feeling uncomfortable or tell you, if there's something off, you can kind of observe there. If you witness something that's critical, the first step, I would honestly say this, especially if you're not someone who needs or wants or can get involved physically, is record it. If you see something, I mean, we're in the age where just, again, everybody has a phone, everybody has the ability to record, and most of the stuff goes online anyway, is get that, because that may turn out to be something you can use as evidence, something you'll end up showing to an officer when you give a police report. At the very least, at the very most, it could turn into a legal situation with court that ends up becoming a very important piece of a case against a perpetrator.
That's great advice. And I think just to kind of piggyback on that a little bit is, and I fall into this situation, I think with everyone else, is that when I'm out in public and I see a situation like this, if I'm with my family or it's just me and the wife going around, walking around the mall or whatever we're doing, and I see a situation, my first thought, an initial instinct of this is not my problem and I don't want to get involved, right? And so that's the first thing that pops into the majority of people's heads, and it's a natural response. So the next thing that I'm starting to develop, right, and have developed for a couple of years, is that if this was me, if I happened to be put into the situation where this is happening to me, who would I want to intervene, right? I would want everybody that's watching, right, to help in some way, shape, or form, whether it's being a good witness to something or stepping in to help me, or, if my wife was walking around by herself and something happened, I would want people who are observing this to help. And so it's hard to really wrap your mind around how you can help when you don't want to get involved. And so it's important for us as a society to start getting into a mindset of, what can I do? Can I be a good witness to this? Because I have my kids with me and I want to get involved. Should I say anything? Let me see how this plays out. And obviously, if it gets physical, do I intervene or do I not have the physical capabilities of doing that? I need to call the police. I need to do something. But I think it's important that we get into our mindset when we go out here, is that if this happened to my family, who would I want to help? And it would be everyone.
That's a phenomenal perspective, Kyle. If you look at it like this, okay, you're out with your family. Your number one goal is to protect your family in any situation like this. So, I mean, I don't have a significant other. I don't have children, but I can only imagine my first instinct would be get them to safety, then I'll deal with it. And I think a lot of people in these scenarios, it's a different mode when you go out and you are basically naturally assigned as the protector of your family, that it changes things, to be fair. The incidents that I've been into, a lot of times I've been out solo. If I've ever been with friends or family, as I mentioned before, the sort of harassment incidents, it was just, I was lucky to be there, 2 adults, no children. But it does change things up, I would say, quite a bit. And I think that, again, I feel in some ways we're getting so numb to things. Like, I can tell you here in LA, from a traffic standpoint, very few people get involved, and with good reason. I've seen incidents where a guy, a minivan door slit open and out pops a guy with a samurai sword. Well, that's not exactly the situation that people are going to want to pull over and try to address. I mean, when you see things like that, or see people get mad and stop another car behind them in traffic and just jump out, people don't even hunk at that, because if somebody's willing to go that far, what else will they do? And again, as I said before, traffic's a whole different ball of wax when it comes to that, when it comes to, road rage incidents, things like that. So tabling those for a second, I agree with you. I think most people would want to help, but also, honestly, regardless of whether we feel people are apathetic or they're numb to these things, I think sometimes people are just, bottom line, are scared, and that's not a bad thing to be in these scenarios. I mean, it's like you have people that are unfortunately put in positions where, if they're not encountering trouble directly, their goal is to avoid it, and that's kind of a natural survival instinct, right? And it really just depends on who you are, what you've been through, and what you feel your role is in society or in the situation you're facing.
I agree with you. I think it is. I know it is a natural response to be scared in situations, especially when people are raising their voices, or, samurai sword in public might catch me off guard a little bit, but or
in traffic on the 405. That was great. That was fantastic. When I saw that, if somebody's willing to pop out of a minivan with a samurai sword in rush hour traffic on the 405, best to keep moving. That's what I would say. Honestly, that would be my advice when it comes to that kind of situation.
Yeah, that's a quick phone call to 911, and we're gonna keep going on that one. Yeah,
yeah, you'll know where to find him. You know what I'm saying? He's right at the Sepulveda exit. But I'm
for
just
sure,
gonna say,
absolutely. All right, so Jake, appreciate the stories. I think it's some great advice, some good insight into if someone encounters something like this, to evaluate the situation and then respond appropriately, whatever that might be. You do a lot of work with Jamie over there at Strictly Stalking Podcast. Can you tell us a little bit about your podcast and the things that you got going on over there?
Sure. We're very proud. We just hit our 3rd year anniversary. We're in season 4 of the show. We've interviewed, at this point, probably over 170 stalking survivors. And the show I'm very grateful and very blessed to be able to do this show and to work with so many amazing voices. Basically, what we do is we provide a platform for survivors to feel safe and come forward. Stalking is a very underreported and truthfully underrecognized crime. And it's not many people, including law enforcement, unfortunately, see it as a crime on the way to a bigger crime, which unfortunately it tends to be. I mean, many people have used this, but it's attributed to very few, is that stalking is murder in slow motion, which unfortunately there have been cases that we have covered and interviewed family members who have been murdered by their stalker. So, going back to the actual theme and the title of your show, Kyle, critical incidents, you're put in a position where when you hear these stories, you really start to understand the severity of what these people have gone through. And ultimately, going back 40 years, there have been some guests that have been stalked through multiple marriages, spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in court fees defending themselves against somebody who is stalking them, basically. Not knowing who is at their door, not knowing who's calling them, not knowing who's texting them, always feeling triggered when it comes to any move that they make in their house or outside of their house, feeling like prisoners in their own home. There's so many things that they encounter that we just take for granted, every day. Assuming that people who are listening to your show, or some may have been stalked, most likely they have been in some form or fashion. So we bring these guests on in an effort to be able to give them the platform to share their story. And it does by all accounts, help them sort of deal with the trauma. But also our hope and our goal is to bring more awareness to really understand, in the words of the people who have survived these situations versus other people that are talking about the situations, third person, because I think this adds a pivotal and sort of important position from victims speaking about their stories and being able to do that. And it's rare that you would get people to come forward that have been through so many things like this, but luckily we've created enough of a base and enough attention that allows people to feel comfortable. And our show gets recommended to a lot of survivors, which we're very fortunate about. So, we're just very, very blessed to be in this position.
Yeah, it's a great podcast. I know that just listening to the stories is, and just hearing what these people go through is something that it can resonate with you, because you might not understand the situation that they were in and have the same emotional response to it just listening to it. But, hearing the things that people go to, the lengths that people go to stalk people is alarming. It really is. And, having lived your life being stalked by someone is going to be such a constant, like looking over your shoulder, even when it's done, even when you think it's done, or they're in jail, or they've moved across the country. Every time a phone rings, you're going to immediately pop into that. Right. And so it's a lifelong battle that they're going to have to deal with. And you have a great platform for, victims or survivors to come check out other people and how they've dealt with it. So it's a great resource for that. So kudos to you and Jamie for putting that together. It's such an impactful podcast, and we greatly enjoy it.
Thank you so much for that, Colin. And I do have to give so much credit and so much, I'm so inspired by our guests, because none of what they've been going through is easy, but they do such a phenomenal job coming forward and sharing their stories so that they can help other people. And we've had guests connect with other guests and get support from there. And so they've created this community around that. And, when Jamie and I began this, there's no way we could have seen this. And, as I said before, I'm grateful to be in a position to do this, because it wasn't anticipated, but it's grown into something, far greater than I would have realized. And ultimately, the feedback from our guests, from our listeners, and even from law enforcement. I don't know if you and I talked about this, but we've had some law enforcement come forward and say, you don't need to contact me back. I just want to tell you that before I listened to your show, I really didn't know how to deal with someone who was dealing with a stalking situation. But I got a call 2 months ago. This woman was being stalked. I was able to sit down with her, walk through some of the steps that one of your guests shared on the show. And now she's in a safer place. I've been able to help her throughout the whole process. And we're in a position where I believe we're going to get justice for her. And I want to thank you for this. And I thought that really goes a long way. And as you know, because this is a person who didn't want us to promote it, didn't want us to get, just wanted to let us know. So I thought that was a pretty profound thing from that standpoint.
Yeah, that's very impactful, especially, when you are doing these podcasts and, we interview people and you have someone that's been stalked and someone who can help a stalker contacts you and says, hey, I learned from you and your podcast and your victims what I can do to help other people. That ultimately is bringing it full circle. And that's a great thing.
Oh, you're totally right about that. It's just something that's, it's just really fulfilling to have something that's making an impact while you're not working on it, if that makes sense. Like, it's almost like this residual flow of positivity that, we record the show, we put the show out there, but it exists in the universe for people to absorb and to learn from and to be entertained by and to be engaged by beyond us sitting down and doing it. And it creates this whole nother thing for people to find a beacon of hope or support. You know, so many people, they'll search stalking or stalking support or whatever, and our show will come up. And a lot of people have said, this really saved me. This really put me in a position where I didn't know where to turn. And as soon as I found this, I felt good. And I haven't felt good in a long time. So that you can imagine how much that would touch us to hear things like that.
Well, Jake, I appreciate you coming on and talking about your situations and telling us about your podcast. I know we finally got to meet last year, right, at CrimeCon in Vegas. That was a great time.
Amazing over dinner, courtesy of you and Heather Ashley.
Yeah, that's right. And it was such a good time. I'm hoping the next time we see you, we'll actually get to speak a little bit more in person. I know you had a little trouble with that last time.
Well, I mean, what are you saying? I mean, what you think? Was I shy in public? Was I? You got to be very, very, very clear with this. Did I not? Was I being standoffish? Was I being? I don't like to talk much. You know that about me. I'm just, when I get in public, I'm not a real conversationalist. So just take that, the fact that I could peep out 3 or 4 words for you during that weekend, just consider yourself lucky. Okay. Let's call it what it is. I sound like an arrogant asshole. No, that was not the case. I had a very bad case of laryngitis. And it was perfect timing. So Jamie and I drove down from Los Angeles to Las Vegas, 5 hours. I couldn't talk, so Jamie was in heaven. She could listen to her radio, didn't have to hear me blab on forever. And so we get down there, and of course, I hit the Vegas air, dry, smoke, perfect. And my voice was gone. So this is a weekend where the goal is to talk to your fellow podcasters, make some friends, connect with people, meet some amazing fans. And I did a lot of observing and listening more than I did speaking, which was good, I think. But I agree with you, Kyle. I think hopefully Orlando will be a much. I'm going to do everything. I'm not going to talk for the week prior, just so you know. I'm going to keep it.
It was memorable, and we're looking forward to the next time we get to actually go have dinner and have full conversations. It'll be good.
Oh my gosh, it'll be amazing.